witches.
Hi, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Cryptids.
I just I can feel already the small amount of like eye twitch that Brittany had because you paused before you before you spoke and she was like, she's not gonna say it. Because every time that we don't do our intro the same way, she gets so mad.
Listen,
And
I
even if
thought I
I'm
had
not
to
here, she
sneeze.
texts me about it.
Thought I had to sneeze. Give me a break.
But yeah, like you said, it's cryptids. And last time we um did our Google Earth we're feeling lucky thing, we got New Zealand. So today we are traveling to Aotearoa, which is the Maori name for New Zealand, translated as the land of the long white cloud. Um what I'm talking about today is not a single lake monster like the Loch Ness monster or a shadowy beast that's seen in one area like the Yeti or Bigfoot. This is Taniwha. Taniwha aren't just cryptids and they're not just monsters, and they're definitely not just stories meant to scare children. These are powerful beings that are woven into the land, water, and ancestry spiritual worldview of the Maori culture. And it's it's a little bit more complicated than just a regular cryptid. So we're going to talk about what they are, where they live, why they matter, and how seriously people still take them today. Um, I'm gonna be prefacing this with um, I am not an expert on the Maori culture, and this is me sharing a story that I don't from a culture that I don't ascribe to, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
what is a taniwha? In the simplest terms, it is a supernatural being. Um, they can be guardians, protectors of tribes. They can be warnings made of flesh, and they can also be um, like enforcers of boundaries, like sacred boundaries. They typically live in rivers, lakes, caves, coastal waters, or deep in ocean currents. Um, and they don't have a single agreed upon physical appearance. So some people describe them as giant reptiles or serpents. Some describe them as sharks or whales. Um, some describe them as massive eels. There's even one description in um, one of the stories that describes it as something that looks like a floating log until it moves. In my head, that's like a crocodile or an
Yeah.
alligator. Um, but the fact that they are described in such different ways is actually important because Taniwha are relational beings, so their form, behavior, and temperament often depend on where they are and who they are connected to. So they're going to look different and act different based on probably what tribe you're around, what like type of land area you are in. Oof. Okay. One thing about them is a lot of the time they're misunderstood, and the assumption is that they're always evil. But actually, many Taniwha are, and I'm gonna I didn't practice pronouncing this one. I have the pronunciation, but Kaitiaki. So that means guardians or protectors. A Taniwha might protect a specific river crossing. They might watch over a fishing ground, guard a sacred burial site, or serve as a spiritual protector for a like ancestral line. In these cases, the guardian and protector Taniwha are not a threat unless rules are broken. And those rules are often about tapu. which are sacred restrictions meant to maintain balance and safety. If someone ignores the warnings of the Taniwha, disrespects the land, or enters a sacred space that they shouldn't, the Taniwha will respond um, and do what it needs to do. Not all Taniwha are benevolent, though. Some of them are described as aggressive, violent, or unpredictable. These ones often inhabit treacherous waters, like places that are prone to drowning, strong currents, or sudden floods. Um, and from a modern perspective, it's really tempting to be like, oh, well, that's just the ancients' way of explaining why that part of water is so dangerous. But that kind of like really generalizes and glances over the point. In Maori tradition, the land itself is alive. Rivers aren't just water, mountains aren't just rock. They're all alive and have energy of their own. Um, and so the danger of these areas isn't random, and these aren't stories made up to explain them away. The Taniwha is the danger, it's the warning, and it's the lesson all wrapped into one. So it's like kind of like a fuck around and find out kind of vibe. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, there are some more modern stories about Taniwha. Um, they're not just historical or part of mythology. They still are talked about in like modern New Zealand. Um, there have been real world cases where construction products in New Zealand were altered or delayed due to concerns about Taniwha inhabiting an area. Um, to Western Christian scientific people, that probably sounds insane. But for Maori communities, this isn't superstition. This is them respecting their ancestral knowledge, acknowledging the land, and their spiritual relationships with the land, and understanding that all forms of knowing are not scientific, but that doesn't make them invalid. Um, which I have a thought about that I'm going to come back to here in a minute. So remind me about quantum physics here in a second. And yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but
What?
we'll come back to it.
Okay.
So not all forms of knowing are scientific, but that doesn't make them invalid. In many cases, places associated with Taniwha also happen to be geologically unstable, prone to flooding, or historically dangerous, which in that case, like, why would you be building there anyway? So like it makes sense to respect the Taniwha, which is in a different way, kind of like the spirits of the land and the water. Um, so it kind of raises an interesting question, like what if the Taniwha stories are a form of intergenerational environmental knowledge instead of like encoded in a story instead of data?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it which totally makes sense. Um, but the big like overarching question here is, do Taniwha count as cryptids? Kind of. If you define a cryptid as a creature whose existence hasn't been proven by science, then yes, Taniwha absolutely are a cryptid. But these aren't just like mythological creatures like Bigfoot to be hunted, photographed, or proven. They exist in a spiritual ecosystem, which brings me back to quantum physics and quantum mechanics. So, a lot of older belief systems believe that the land is alive and that there is a sixth sense or sixth thing um, that is like extrasensory perception or being able to astral project, like those kind of more new age, even though they're ancient, philosophies of being able to interact with the energy of the world. Um, But I watched a really interesting video. I had it shared with me from one of the women in the circle that I go to, about how that has just been rebranded into like quantum leaps and quantum physics and like the alternate realities of the quantum sciences. And I thought that was really fascinating because, like, exactly. In that video, I'll try to find it and post it, but the video was like a lot more scientific and like had exact parallels that I can't remember right now. But it's an interesting thought process and it goes along with the Taniwha really well. So
Hmm,
those are the
cool.
Taniwha. And pretty interesting, pretty cool
Yeah.
sounding.
Um, okay, well, I'm talking about what I believe to be basically the New Zealand version of what's the word? New Zealand version of Sasquatch. So I'm going to be talking about the Maero. Um, they are also called the wild forest people, depending on who's talking about them, like which tribe. They could also be called the Mohoao. Um, so these are basically people who live in the deep forests of Aotearoa. Is that how it's pronounced? Aotearoa?
Aotearoa.
Aotearoa. I like practice it and then I just like completely lost. Or New Zealand. So they're sometimes called the wild people of the forest. They're not gentle guardians, but they're also not like tricksters. They're not guides. They're something far older, something more raw, something that stands like firmly on the side of the forest itself. And it can, stand as a brief reminder that not every wilderness welcomes us and not every spirit wants to be understood. So who are they? They are basically wild humanoid beings who inhabit remote forests, mountains, and river valleys. Their characteristics often vary by the region, but commonly they are described as tall, gaunt, or muscular bodies, long, very unkempt hair, claws or sharpened nails, stone tools or permanent weapons, a fierce territorial nature, and they're often associated with the deep bush, so very far from cultivated land. Um, in some traditions, they are actually described as tapu, or sacred or restricted, not because they are holy, but because they belong to a realm humans were actually never meant to enter casually. So it's kind of like this weird crossover between like a spirit and Sasquatch to me. Um, so some of the origins, so different tribes, or as they call tribes Iwi, offer different explanations for the Maero's existence. Some say that they are descendant from an ancient forest beings who existed before humans arrived. Um, Others describe them as spirits of the land shaped by the forest themselves or itself. A few traditions portray them as humans who rejected society, uh, choosing the wild over the community. Now, hello.
Hi, my headphones just died.
So a few traditions portray them as humans who rejected society. So, they could actually be ancient humans, from periods prior to like early dated history that we're aware of, that chose to be on their own instead of, I guess, kind of like not necessarily conforming, but moving into more of a uniform society, I guess. Um, However, across any and all variations, the one theme does remain constant. They do not coexist peacefully with humans. Um, so
Valid, honestly.
yeah. So they are not like a single uniform figure. Their identity can shift with the landscape, so like regional variations in names. So in some regions, the Maero are known as Mohohau, or a term that can mean wild person or a bush dweller. These beings are often described as like more spirit-ish, more spirit-like, less physically solid, and capable of appearing and disappearing. Um, I did not look this one up. In the Coromandel region, I think, um, the Moehau are often said to inhabit the rugged mountain ranges. Some modern stories blend them with hairy hominid sightings, but traditional accounts emphasize that their spiritual and territorial nature. Turehu, um, sometimes confused with um Maero, uh, they're not the same. So the two Rehu are pale, ethereal forest beings, unlike the Maero. They're not typically violent. They actually contrast with that idea, and it helps highlight the Maero's distinct role of enforcers of the wild. So like they're like the guardians. Stories of Maero encounters often share similar patterns, so territorial aggression. They attack humans who enter their domain without respect. This may include throwing stones, ambushing travelers, leaving claw marks on trees, or stealing and destroying tools. One story tells of a Maero who lived near a river gorge and hurled rocks at anyone who tried to fish there. The message was very clear: this place is not yours.
Sounds like they probably work closely with the Taniwha.
Yeah. Um, Abductions or disappearances. Some traditions link Maero to unexplained disappearances in the bush. These stories serve as both cautionary tales and reminders of the forest dangers to any and all who listen. Um, Disturbing the environment. Maero are said to uproot plants, scatter traps, or sabotage human attempts to cultivate the land. They resist domestication, not just of themselves, but of the forest. So they're very, do not touch my area. This land is sacred because it's the forest and you shouldn't touch it. So it's very eco-friendly type of people. Um, Here are some signs of their presence that you can, like, if you are out in the bush and you see these things. People have often described strange footprints, sudden silence in the forest. That's always eerie when you're in the forest and everything grows quiet, because then you're like, oh fuck, what the hell? Like, is it just getting dark? Is there like some predator nearby? Like, what the fuck? Um,
That's like when you hear whistling in Appalachia.
yeah, there's a place near my hometown. I don't know where the name comes from, but it's called Okefenokee. The Okefenokee Forest. It's like out by the dam, and I tell you what, it takes a long time to get back there. It don't take near as long to exit as you're leaving. It's a one road, like dirt road, one way dirt road to the middle of this forest. And when you pull into the forest area, it is just like a clear opening, and it's like right next to a river. Now there are trails out here and you can see horses, but there's like a lot of scary like rumors to have happened out that way. Um and I was out there one night because I was a stupid teenager and we went out there as a dare. The entire forest got quiet and like all of us got lost in that forest for like a little bit. We couldn't figure out where to go, what we were doing. And then we all finally suddenly like found our way back. And I was like, I want to leave. I never want to get back out of this car here again unless it's daylight. And that's the only time I ever wanted to visit and get out of the car was daylight. It was terrifying. Um, but anyways, so sudden silences in the forest, the feeling of being watched, a musky, earthy smell, trees bent or broken in unnatural ways. So these details can paint the Maero as deeply integrated with the land, not necessarily separated from it. Um, so yeah, here's some themes and symbolism for them. So they actually can carry powerful symbolic weight in the Maori cosmology and in modern interpretation. So one of them is the untamed world. The Maero represent the parts of the nature that remain beyond human control. They are the forest's refusal to be tamed. The boundaries in the tapu, the Maori worldview. Certain places are tapu, um, sacred, restricted, or dangerous. The Maero enforces these boundaries physically, violently, and without negotiation. The ecological memory. In contemporary lens, the Maero can be seen as symbols of environmental resistance. They embody the land's pushback against exploitation. Also, the shadow self. Psychologically, the Maero reflect the wildness humans suppress: instinct, anger, freedom, fear. They are the parts of us that refuse to be civilized. I'm going to channel my inner Maero nowadays. Um, Also, colonial misinterpretation. So, early European settlers sometimes conflated Maero stories with wild men or hairy hominids, missing. What is the difference between hominids and hominoids? I'm looking this up.
That's a question for the intranet. I don't know.
Hominids are great apes, like primates. Hominoids are a tail of or a group of tailless primates, commonly known. They're the same damn thing. Oh, hominids are all current and extinct great apes. Humans, gorillas, orangutans. Well, homonym. What? No. Are hominoids and hominids the same? Hominoid is just an ape. It's a member of the superfamily, which includes the gibbons, the lesser apes family, and the hominids. The hominid is a member of the great ape family, like orangutans, gorillas, chimps, and humans. Well, look at that. There's a little
So
etymology for you
size,
today,
that's the difference?
I guess. They're not humanoid, which is, I think, is probably why I'm getting it mixed up. Humanoid instead of hominid. Um. Anyways, early European settlers sometimes. What the fuck is wrong with me? Settlers
That is a question we do not have time for on one episode.
sometimes conflated Maero stories with wild men or hairy hominids, missing the cultural context. The Maero are not cryptids, they are actually spiritual beings tied to the Maori cosmology, land, and identity. So a lot of people ask, like, why does this still matter? But even today, they remain relevant because they speak to universal tensions. So the human expansion versus natural boundaries, respect versus entitlement, memory versus forgetting, and civilization versus wilderness. They remind us that the world is definitely older than us and that some places, physical or emotional, demand humility. So the Maero stands as guardians of the wild, embodiments of the forest autonomy. They're not necessarily here to guide us or teach us. They are just here to remind us that not everything belongs to us and not everything wants to be known. So I tell you what, if you ever think you're in a forest and it gets quiet and you feel like something's watching you, like, I'm not saying I like metaphor spirit, but I tell you what, that shit is terrifying.
That absolutely would be terrifying.
So, but yeah, that is my Aroy, not cryptid. I do have Google Earth up and ready for the next one. So let's see where we're going. Feeling lucky. Oh my goodness, we're going to London. Birmingham. No, that's not it. I don't know where this is. Anyways, we're going to the United Kingdom. So,
Nice. I feel like they probably have some interesting ones.
yeah, a lot of their tales are fucking crazy. But yeah, so we will see you next time for Cryptids in United Kingdom. Until next time.
Bye.